All right, folks, welcome back. We are starting 2025 with a bang with Equation of Excellence. I had to rip him off the mountain. He was doing what are the double black diamonds, right? That's for the
Those
crazy,
are the tough
crazy
ones.
kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then
Yeah.
have you ever done any offline skiing? Supposedly that's super scary, very
No,
avalanchey,
but
right?
no, it's pretty sketchy. The area we're in actually does a ton. They do cat skiing, heli skiing and stuff, but I had the young kids with me, so I wasn't able to jump
You
in.
can't do it. Have you ever seen that video of the guy with the avalanche and he's outrunning it and he backflips
Yeah,
during
like what
outrunning
a
the what a
what a
psycho.
psych. That guy has no kids, I can tell you that much.
That's it. There's that guy has no kids. Well, for the folks that don't know, Shaun Brandt, founder, used to be at Brandify, founder of Audit, doing all the cool things, CRO, design, branding, all the things. Dude, you're one of my favorite humans. I'm actually wearing a little shout out to Audit. Some of my favorite branding, great name. You also, the little mug is so nice that you sent me. I use it all the time. I'm using
Nice.
an OG whale mug right now, but the little care package was really sweet that you guys sent me. But yeah, for people that don't know you, let's give the Shaun elevator pitch, like in 2 minutes, kind of where you've been, where you are, where you're
Yeah.
going.
Yeah, so I kind of stumbled into design. I always had an eye for design back in probably 2010 was when I first started getting into branding and web, and just had the eye, but never really had any formal training, or like, I couldn't, I'm
Yep.
not a good artist, like with pencil or anything. And, but always had the eye. So started a branding agency with my other co-founder at Audit. And, we just started hiring the best designers in the world to do our
Yeah.
projects for us. And everyone thought it was us. And, we didn't take credit for it. We told them it was our team or whoever we had hired, but became really well known as just someone who could curate design really well. And it just kind of snowballed from there. So we ended up growing that agency to, over 100 people and offices in 6 cities or 6 countries. And yeah, really focused on branding and like super high level UX flows and digital design for about a decade. And then took some time off. And now we're doing Audit, which was everything I hated about running an agency, stripped it away, and now I don't have to talk to anybody
Yes.
except stuff like this, and I love it. So Audit is essentially the same thing. We're doing, I mean, it's CRO at the end of the day, but we're doing UI UX optimization, brand optimization, but fully remote. No people in office, no client calls, no feedback loops, just one direction, which is, I mean, one of the main things that helps us stand out is kind of that different way of being an agency partner or a design partner for brands, I think.
Yeah, no, I love it. When I was running my agency, I used you guys a couple times, and it's phenomenal. The deliverable is just so incredible, and I think for me the differentiator that was with you guys is I think CRO can be overrun with quants where they're just how do I number push or whatever, and you guys were really ingrained in the jobs to be done into almost I would say like empathetic design. Like you were like, if like, do I want to use this website? Would this website
Yeah.
make me buy this? Like, is this the information I'd want to see when I would do this and stuff? And not to say that you guys don't use data, but I think you use data in a way that is actually more meaningful than said a different way. I think you guys are growers, not optimizers. And obviously it's a little bit of a conflict in conversion rate optimization,
Yeah.
but I don't think optimization is necessarily bad. It's just a different mindset than growth, where you guys were really about what are we can do to find the 5x, the 10x, 20x kind of change versus like, hey, we're going to get you a half a point here if you change the color of this button and stuff. And I thought
Yeah.
that had been the first CRO agency that I had encountered that had that perspective, but also the ability to then manifest those ideals into really thoughtful and candidly just aesthetically pleasing design.
Yeah. And I think a lot of our clients just, they've tried it. Like we deal with a lot of brands with a lot of longevity. They've tried everything. They have 4 agency partners a year, and they don't even know what we do necessarily. They just want to try something new, try something different, a different approach. And for the price we charge versus a design agency or a CRO agency, it's just, for a lot of the brands we deal with, it's kind of like, well, why not? We'll try it. And,
Exactly.
thankfully they're very pleased when they do, but it's, when we were running that larger agency, we had contracts for, some of them were, $1 million a year just in design. And in order to test those flows in those projects, we would do 3 user tests straight from usertesting.com. And, now you're dealing with CRO agency that's dealing with a Shopify store that does $500K a year, and they're charging them 5-10K a month just for testing.
Yes.
And the mentality is just kind of like, man, like most of that shit I can tell you by just, I got 3 people in the office. We can just get tests right now. We don't need to go run all this shit. And that's not to downplay the power of some of that stuff. Most of them are extremely effective and generate a lot of gains for the clients, but we're just kind of taking an alternate path. It's not one is right, one is wrong. It's just a different way of doing it.
I know with because we first connected when I was over at Triple Whale, and that was one of when we would do your little CRO breakdowns and people would just submit their sites on the live stream. We need to bring that back. That was one of our most popular actually shows where you would just brain dump. And I think that, I know some people just have that touch, that thing where, actually this is kind of total tangent, but do you think leadership, or let me say it a different way. Do you think you can teach somebody to be a leader?
That's a tough one because and it's a good question because we're doing it right now, where we're trying to get all of our leaders out of their positions into team members' hands.
Yes.
And it's interesting. How we've been doing it is I've been making, every time that I do something that's critical throughout the day. So let's say it's reviewing a team member's work or reviewing, we do annotations on all of our submissions, right? So say you submit your site, I go in and I say, okay, here's what's wrong before anyone touched it.
Yes.
And all I do is I just make Loom videos of every one of those things. And I think out loud on the video. And then our team watches those. Everyone who wants to train to be in a leadership role has to watch all of those. And I honestly, for the few that have been successful at it, I've only had to make like 5 or 6 videos of my thought process.
Yes.
Caveat being our processes aren't that complex. And part of Audit's kind of secret sauce is we really do dumb down every aspect of it. I mean, you've heard me tear down websites. You don't hear any of it and you're like, holy shit, I've never thought of that. You usually hear it and you're like, fuck, why didn't I think of that? That's so simple. Yes. So it's really not teaching leadership, at least in our company. It's more about how do you just teach them to just think more simply, honestly, just like focus on the things that matter and stop worrying about all the fluff and clutter and just assess exactly what's there at that time. And for us, it's worked. But in terms of like other businesses we've had where we're trying to train up leaders, it's the hardest thing to train for. It's probably one of the only roles where it is kind of like at least half of it is it's in your DNA or it's not. It's really hard to learn.
So that's where I landed, where there's this funny quote where you can't teach smart or you can't teach height. And I think you can teach leadership, but you can't teach someone to be a leader. Like there's just some people that can, like, you can fill a room. There's just some people that can just fill a room and command attention, and there's others that can't. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. But I just think you're right. I think there's some sort of DNA gene that gets flicked on where this person is a leader versus other people aren't. But yeah, I've had the same experience where you can teach people to be very forward thinking, to do like one of the tests when I hire people. It's like, before I kind of give up the reins, I'm like, okay, cool. What do you think I would do in this situation? And once they kind of parrot back to me what my thoughts are, like, yeah, okay, cool. Now I don't need to hover over anymore, go run. But when you really hire well, when they give you an answer, you're like, no, that's not my answer at all, but it's way better than what I was thinking.
Yeah.
That's the move.
Yeah. Well, and I think just one last note there. I think the one, and we were talking about this before the podcast with kind of being founder versus a leadership role even. Yeah. And one of the things we do, at least at Audit and the companies we've run, is like, if you want to be in a leadership position, it likely comes with some sort of equity or profit sharing. And it likely comes with a little more personal risk, which that's one of the main things with leadership that you're either comfortable with that or you're not. And when I say to someone, yeah, okay, we're going to increase your salary 20%, you're now a leader, whatever, But when February comes and no one buys an audit, guess whose salary gets knocked first? Mine goes to zero, then Cam's goes to zero, then Taylor's goes to zero, and then you're up, and yours goes to zero because none of our employees aren't getting paid. So if that risk is okay with you, right, and that's an unlikely scenario, but if as long as you're comfortable with that risk, then you're there. And honestly, just when it actually comes, time to sign the dotted line, a lot of people aren't comfortable with that.
Yeah. No, I'm so with you on that. And I think the one, transparency is great, but I also think that's when you can see what somebody's real character is. Like everybody's want to say they're the person that's going to run into the burning house. But
Yeah,
until you're encountered with the burning house, you really don't know what you're going to do. And I think
yeah,
that's when that for me, that's the definition of character is like, what do you do when nobody's looking, or what do you do in a really challenging situation? Are you still going to stick to the ideals and be the person that you think you are, or are you going to crumble? And I think, it's hard. It's hard, and
yeah,
shitty situations suck. But at the same time, I've been battling, like, I think without the lows, the highs don't feel as good. And it's a bit
yeah.
Nietzschean,
No,
but
totally.
it's that's kind of a lot of times too. That's when you learn. Like very rarely do you learn from success. You're like, dude, I did great, but it's when the failures hit you, and that's where everybody's gonna fail, man. I'm old as shit, and I've been in this game for a minute. And the number one thing I can tell you that I know is nobody knows what the fuck they're doing.
Yeah,
Everybody
no,
is just making it. I don't care how talented you are, how much you've been doing it. Everybody's just making it up, and so you definitely want to be able to give yourself some grace, but at the same time, like I don't get frustrated with mistakes. I get frustrated with repetitive mistakes that like just don't do the same thing over and over again. Like that's
yeah,
when I get frustrated. But
no,
um,
100%.
with all this stuff going on, you got 3 kiddos, wonderful partner. How do you structure your day? Like you're healthy, you're happy, you're
Yeah,
inspired. Like what does your day to days look like?
for the last 15 years, it was quite aggressive, like up at 6, right on the phone, right on the computer, get out the door as fast as I can, and then work till 6 or 7, and really just eat like crap. Didn't do anything physical, and I was just worn down. Like I get bad migraines, all that crap, and it was just time for a change. So I totally flipped everything. I get up in a reasonable time. I spend time with my kids, feed the kids, get them out to school. Then I work out at least an hour every morning, um, eat a healthy lunch, that type of thing. I usually only work, honestly, not to be the asshole, like I work like 6 hours a day max. Like,
Yes.
and that's, could we make more money if I work 10? For sure. But I'm at that point now where I'm just like, there's just more important things. Like we have Audit's making enough. We're doing great. We grew 40% last year. It's like, could we have grown 60? Sure. But do I want to dwell on that and go back to that grinder mindset? Like, and that's no slight to anyone that's in that founder mode where you're just heads down 12 hours a day. I've been there and I get it. But for me, I needed that shift, and it's been like exponential change. I haven't gotten sick in 18 months, like nothing. I'm a completely different person. And, I think it's great to be in a position, like not everyone's in the position to do that, but for me, getting out of that mindset where, and I'm sure you have the same thing where it's like if it's 3 o'clock and you're not on a computer, you feel guilt, or if it's
Yes.
9 o'clock a.m. and you're not on the computer, you feel guilt. That was the biggest thing to buck, because most of the
Yes.
time, in some of those times, you're just like you're sitting there doing nothing. You end up on
Yes.
Twitter because maybe there's less to do or there's not something urgent, and so just getting out of that mindset where it's okay to just like close it and just not be there. I think that was probably the biggest shift for me to be able to do that stuff. But now it's great. I have a pretty solid like regiment schedule
That's
where
beautiful.
the team gets the time they need, my family gets the time they need. It's pretty balanced.
Yeah, I'm same working through the same thing. Early stage startups really challenging, but I think the things that I'm realizing are exactly what you said. Where one, if you don't take care of your health, it's not that is the number one thing. I think it's almost that airplane analogy, right? Like you got to put the mask on first because I'm a
Yeah,
very I'll get to the empty cup kind of thing. And I'm just like a obliger. I love to please people, all these things, but you have to put yourself first. And that way you can show up. And the other thing that was happening to me when I was doing the grind mode as well, I'm kind of still, but you end up giving your best self to the least important people. And it's like,
Yeah.
oh man, it's so crazy where like your partner or your friends or your kids, what have you, get the worst version of you, but these people that actually don't matter get the best version of you. And that
Yeah.
was something that really hit me where I was like, oh my gosh, man, I don't even want to be around myself. Like, what am I doing here? And I think that um, I will say if you're young, grind. I was a
Yeah.
big person in the, learn in your 20s, earn in your 30s kind of
Yeah.
thing, where it's like because once you get a little bit older, you get some financial security. I started seeing money, like how expensive is this money that I'm making?
Yeah.
Because you can make a ton of money, but like I've been in times where I'm making a ton of money and I was miserable. I had
Yeah.
everything I thought I wanted and I was just miserable. And I don't know. I'm a huge capitalist. Not to say you shouldn't make money, but once you get a certain semblance of financial stability, then you start to really think of like how, like again, how expensive is this money? Like, is this really
Yeah.
kind of what I want to be doing with my life? And Jobs had horrible human, but fantastic leader. He had a great line where he'd look at himself every day in the mirror and say, "Is this what I want to do with my day today?" And if
Yeah.
the answer was no, too many days in a row, he knew and he had to change something.
Yeah. And that's honestly that's what we've done for, 15 years now, is just every few months it's like a gut check of like, all right, are we still happy at work?
Yes.
Right? Like if you're, and that's why we've went through so many companies, is because, quite frequently the
Yeah.
answer comes up, no, we're not.
Yeah.
Okay, let's sell it. Or if it's not a sellable asset, let's close it and move on. I've been very lucky to have partners that have the same amount of nostalgia for business as me, which is exactly zero. It's it it's a job to me, and I'm very thankful if it's a sellable asset. But if it's not, I'm just like, okay, well, let's cut our losses and let's move on. Let's do something we're excited about. Because honestly, usually, if you're excited, you're going to make more money anyway at the end of the day. If you're not focused on that and you're just happy and excited doing what you're doing, you're going to do better work and you're going to be more efficient, right? Like I can work 6 hours a day partially because I'm an efficient person, but partially because I have my list of shit to do and I'm so used to doing it and good at it and I'm happy doing it that I'm not sitting there being like, oh, like what time is it? Like I don't look at the
Yes.
fucking clock ever. I'm
Yes.
excited with what I'm doing. I'm happy with what I'm doing. And when I'm not, then I'll move on to the next thing.
No, it's so well said. And there's also another line where the task will expand into the time you give it. And
Yeah,
so if you don't
exactly.
have those barriers on that, I think that's super important. Okay, switching gears a little bit. What's your take on AI? How are you guys leveraging it? What's your take? How should people be using it? Because I think one of the last bastions that is going to be very difficult to penetrate with AI is um, pure gorgeous branding. But I
Mm-hmm.
will say it is a fantastic sounding board.
Yeah. And I think that's always in the back of my mind with what we do, because I see so much stuff coming out with, like, I saw one yesterday where someone was building a whole CAD model
Yeah.
for like a prototype of something just
Yeah.
from a prompt. And I was like, yeah, that's,
That's your
think of
elite
that prompt.
gears.
Yeah.
You used to be in the atoms.
Yeah. So like you get into that type of stuff, and as that progresses and gets better and better, and it's going to get better and better, just like every piece of technology that's valuable and useful, eh, you know, companies like Audit will slowly become less important and less effective. And so that is on our radar of just like, we have an exit, an off ramp planned.
Exactly.
We don't have an intention of actually becoming like an AI based design company. We leverage it a lot. Like we have a lot of customers that reach out and they're like, "Oh, we love everything you did. Do you mind like rewriting all our copy while you're at it?"
Yeah.
And we're like, "Yeah, but just like a disclaimer, we're going to take everything you have. We're going to take all our inputs and we're going to spit it out on AI, and we'll show you how we did it so you can do it next time." But we're very upfront about it. And so we use it for stuff like that, but we admittedly don't use it for any design. I just feel like it's still at the point where you can tell it's AI.
Yes. Yes.
Um, and for me, it's kind of like stock photography. Stock
Yes.
photography became this, oh, it's just easier. And it became this huge,
Yes.
really big growth thing for photography. And now it's gotten to the point where it's like, oh, I can tell that's stock photography. And now it's back on the downturn.
Yes.
Whereas AI's hasn't hit in that, oh, it's believable yet. And so for me, I think there's still time to inject that artisanal approach, if you want to call it that, of just like it's better design. But I don't think we're that far off from getting there, sadly.
Dude, I completely agree with you. But kind of the interesting take from my point of view is people like you are going to become exponentially more valuable because I'll tell you what AI doesn't have: taste. And that I think is the last thing that like, and so going back to like your artisanal, I think it's going to become very in vogue and going to be this kind of almost moniker of wealth that I got something done by
Yeah,
human than I did by AI, where I think there's going to be a really interesting, because the one thing, and again, obviously the models are getting crazy, but and they're adding memory and all this stuff, but the one thing that AI isn't great at is iteration. And so it
yeah,
can get you somewhere, but like iterating on it, it always kind of starts at this ground zero, and then it's like, hey, change this or change that, and then it gives you a whole nother 0 to 1 versus like I want to go 1 to n. And so I think that is where and I also like, and again, I'm getting old, so this might be old man yelling at the sky, but I worry about kind of the brain rot where I hate long division, but I needed to learn mathematics, and then you can use a calculator, and I
yeah,
worry that people are just jumping into Chat GPT or AI, and those kind of muscles that you need to build to have this tastemaker mentality, this understanding of the first principles, is kind of
yeah,
getting eroded away because people are shortcutting to the end product. And I can't decide if I'm being old man yelling at the sky or if that's an actual thing, but that is one thing where the youth. But at the same time, I will say I think it's because we both grew up when the internet was coming up,
yeah,
and if you wanted to be Britannica, Encyclopedia Britannica, and just read, it's like, okay, cool, but you're going to get left behind because the internet was sensational. So I don't think you should shun AI. I think you should absolutely embrace it if you're young. But I do think that you should make sure it's almost like that thing about reading the classics, right? Like you should understand the first principles and what makes
yeah,
great taste, great brands, and then use what I've found AI to be really great at is augmenting people. And so
yeah,
instead of needing 5 people, I can do it with a team of 2, and I can just bat back and forth. And so, like, this is for me, like the best time to start an agency because you can service so many more clients with
yeah,
really low headcount at a really reasonable, output, versus before you would need X, Y, and Z. And I also find it really good for copy where like you were
yeah,
saying where like so self-proclaimed, but I think I'm a pretty decent writer. And every time I put my essay through, like I don't tell it to write me the essay, but every time I put the essay through, it comes back better, man. It just
yeah.
does. And so that is something that I think is really interesting where it can make great people even greater. I don't think it makes average people great.
Yeah, and I think it, it leveraging AI and how much AI can be useful or how much it's a competitor, it so much depends on your personal vision of things, right?
Yes.
Like I said, audit, we're not looking to become 100 million. We're
Yes.
not looking to take 100,000 customers or whatever, grow at that rate. We're capturing 1% of the Shopify market, and those are the people that really care about design.
Yes.
I don't, I haven't had the acronym AI come up once on a call in 3 years. And that's because that's not what they're looking for. It's the same with some of my contract clients. I don't deal with many anymore, but the only people I still work with are the restaurateurs who are so passionate and artistic. They just not a fucking chance they're putting anything
Yes.
into AI ever. Doesn't
Yes.
matter what it costs. So those are the people we work with and the people that we're going to continue working with. And if we had a different dream or path of growing at that rate, we'd probably be leveraging it a lot differently.
Yeah.
It's just not, it's not something that interests me. And it's not something that, we got into it because we really love and understand design. And to me, it's just a different business than what we're doing. The, on the actual like taste front there, I don't know if you saw the video or it was an interview. I don't know what it was with Ben Affleck about film,
Yes.
but he was talking about how a similar space just being like, it's going to be super beneficial and cut costs and all that stuff, but it's just never going to be able to have taste,
Yes.
and that will never be replaced. And usually when people explain that type of stuff, you're just kind of like, okay, sure, whatever. He just doesn't want to lose his job. But he explained it in a really, I wish I remembered more of it, but he explained it in a really effective way where it was like, yeah, that makes a ton of sense. clearly a smart guy and had thought about it a lot, but I think that's more my mindset and similar to
Same.
yours, where it's just like, we're just more attacking the people that are interested in the taste side of things than they are necessarily just, we have no design, we need design. Okay, well, we should probably hire an AI company.
Yeah, no, super, super well said. What did you think of Jaguar rebrand?
Oh man. Um, I mean, I've been in enough boardrooms with those conversations that I understand how they got there. It's just sad because it's brands that have such a legacy like that. It's like, there's so many companies who could do that brand and be like, okay, whatever, sure. Like, so let's say a new electric car company pops up and that's the brand. No one would say shit, right? It's whatever.
Yes.
It's less about was the design good or bad, and more about why would you want to kill such a formidable legacy? That's what doesn't make sense to me.
That,
Yeah,
that's exactly where I land. Like, I would kill for a heritage brand. Like by
yeah,
definition, it lived for so long. It's a Lindy effect, like something that's going to be been around for 100 years, probably could be around for another 100 years. And I would argue that is probably not only the most iconic auto logo, but just
yeah,
probably the best logo. The Jaguar, it was perfect. And so this is what exactly complete same take. And for me, it was like, okay, cool. If this is a business move, why don't you just start a sub brand of Jaguar EV?
yeah,
And
yeah,
then you can use all this branding, but to scuttle the heritage of it. And I think the irony of all of it is they wanted to be more inclusive, but the people they were exclusive to were the people that were actually going to buy the Jaguars in the first place and had been buying the Jaguars.
yeah,
So I think that was the for me I to your point, I get where the impetus came from, but I don't know, I just cannot, I can't see how scuttling such a hair. I mean, it's the James Bond car, for God's sake.
yeah,
Like, it's like I thought that was just a really big miss on their part, and I don't. I just I've been trying to, because when I have these knee jerk reactions, there's something there where I'm like, hey, I need to cool down and try and like process this in a way
yeah,
that is more like objective than subjective. But the only thing I came back with is if it was going to be like a big gotcha, where it's like, we're
yeah,
playing, we're not going to scuttle it, and obviously it's not. But to go from just that gorgeous Jaguar iconic logo, the Jaguar head, to this like cheesy high fashion like Chanel J's, I'm like, oh my gosh, I thought
no,
I don't know. We'll see how it lands, but I think that's because outside of, I think shoes and automotive are probably the two most kind of loyalty driven
yeah,
verticals I can think of. Like, once you find a pair of shoes you like, you buy as many as you can, and once you find a car or a car maker that you really align with, and I mean, Jaguar used to be like this aspirational kind of purchase, and now it's like, man, I don't. This isn't going to make me want a Jaguar. So I
yeah,
don't know.
and
I was the same with you.
I just don't think there's any need to, for lack of a better word, pick a side. Like, why can't it just be a 100-year-old car brand that makes great cars and has timeless
Exactly right.
taste, and the leather just smells better and feels better? Like,
That's
why can't
exactly
it
right.
just be that? I think we get a lot of brands that come to us, and they all want a refresh, right, of
Yes.
something. And the first question I always ask is like, okay, that's totally fair, but like, what's the reason for it? And
Yes.
usually the reason is they're just bored of it. And
Yes.
that's okay. When you're a small brand, that's fine, right? Like, we literally Audit refreshed last year, and there was no other reason other than just we're bored of it and we wanted a
Right.
creative endeavor. That was it. Um, and that's fine. But when you're a 100-year-old company, you can't just refresh because you feel like it. There's got to be
Oh,
a reason, right? Like, if you sent out a questionnaire to all your, million customers over the last decade, and they all said, we wish Jaguar was more inclusive and was pink, great. But there's no fucking way they did. So
0%.
it makes no sense to me. Like, you see brands like Porsche that have held on to it so
Oh,
beautifully for so long, and they just, every decision
oh,
is so masterfully executed and tasteful and decided. It just makes no sense to me to step away from that when you see everyone
yeah.
else being successful going the other way.
I will say the Burberry rebrand was not horrible. going back, but it's almost not a rebrand. It was going back to the roots with
Yeah.
the night and stuff. So it's not even in the same realm. But I think that was interesting because they needed to shake kind of the chuggy kind of like it got a little long in the tooth. But yeah, I completely agree with you, man. I think that I don't know. We'll see how it pans out. But I also think one of the challenges they had was like the Jaguar cars just weren't as cool as they used to be.
Yep.
And I think marketing is a function of product. And if your product is in a certain place, there's not a lot you can do. Like marketing can't change product. And so you do have to work with what you have. But yeah, I don't know how that got greenlit because that is, yeah, it was, I think that was terrible. HBO Max going to Max was horrific. And then I
Mm-hmm.
think Twitter going to X was probably the worst brand move ever, which is ironic because you could make a really strong case that Elon Musk is arguably the best brand builder of our generation, which is very
Yeah, and
perplexing.
I'm on the same page with you with that one, but it's that's probably the only scenario in history where for that amount of money and that big of a brand, he could do it just because he felt like it. And
Well,
that's
because he bought it, so it's like
yeah,
it's one thing to own it.
there is really no other reason other than he's just like, I like the letter X, and so we're gonna make it X. Is it better? No.
Fair,
Is it prettier? No. But fuck you. I spent 44 billion. I'll do what I want. That was the only
fair,
reason.
super fair. But my thing is, I think the pinnacle of branding is a verb.
Yeah,
And you had the
I agree.
tweet. You know what I mean? You had the bird, which was so iconic, and it was just like this thing. So I agree with you. There's that thing, kind of, boss's prerogative. So it's like, of course, he can do it because he bought it. But I thought that was a really weird, yeah,
Yeah, I agree.
that's the worst rebrand for me. Shortly behind the Jaguar and the HBO Max. HBO Max is like, what are you talking about, dude? HBO is so iconic. Like
Yeah.
everybody says HBO Max anyways. Like nobody's gonna say Max. Like it just made no sense. But
Yeah.
is there a brand you would want to take over? Like if I said, okay, you get a wizard wand and you can become the CEO or CMO or chief brand officer of any brand, is there any brand that just jumps out to you?
The one that's been on my radar the most over the last 5 years was it's a brand out of New York called ALD. I don't even know how it's French, but Aim Leon Dior.
They just did the
And
crazy collab with Porsche. It
yeah,
was
they did.
gorgeous.
Yeah. So I've bought their clothes for a long time, and I've just always liked the clothing. No real
That's how you
like,
know the man's doing well.
yeah. So I've always just bought their clothes, but I I was in New York last year and went to like the actual store, and it's kind of like them and Aesop
Yep.
are my two like brand, like no one dials the details like those two.
Yes.
And Aesop's always been a big one of mine just because every store has this exact same DNA that you can't put your finger on, but they're all
Yes.
so different, which
Yep.
is, if someone is a non-designer, it's like, that's the hardest thing ever to do.
So hard.
For them to have 1,000 stores and they're all award-winning designs in different fields and different styles, but they all feel like Aesop, that's the hardest design thing to do.
Completely agree.
But ALD was a similar experience. When I went to the store for the first time, there was like, maybe I'd never shopped this way, but there was a door guy and he put you on a list and then they texted you when your spot was ready. And then when you went in to just shop, each person that went in had their own personal sales associate. There was a DJ playing. They had like the perfect scents in the room. It was like, oh man, the shopping experience just made you feel like something I'd never done before. And I'm not someone who's shopping at Winners usually, right? So that was, for me, I was like, man, this is crazy unique. Even for, that level of, or that price point. So for me, and they only have one store, physical store, I think, but that type of like attention to detail is what interests me. It's not necessarily a specific vertical or anything. It's that, Aesop skincare and that's fashion, but I think that attention to detail just tells me that there's a group, probably unlike the groups leading Jaguar now, that are just like, there's 100 check boxes to check before anything goes out. And that to me just takes so much passion, but just so much like, you really have to give a shit and you really have to have an eye for the details to like put everything out in line and always hit the mark. It's very hard.
And I think it has to come from the top, because if
Yeah.
the CEO or the founder or whoever is running the P&L doesn't value that, it gets destroyed, because they're like, hey, why are we spending $20 on candles when we could spend $5? And you're like, because these are
Yeah.
the cents that, like, no, we're going to buy the
Yeah.
$5. I completely agree with you too. I was just listening to a podcast, Invest with the Best, with Ronnie Fig, the Kith guy, who's living the absolute dream, dude. New York
Yeah.
Knicks, Kith, like, this guy is just, he was brilliant. But
Yeah.
that's what he talked about, where he was like, a lot of these luxury stores, especially like high end fashion, all have this same similar blueprint. And when you do that, it actually, like, again, ironically makes it feel less exclusive and less luxurious, because it's the same store. It's like almost
Yeah.
like a franchise feeling, where, again, there's nothing wrong with franchises, but when you're at that price point, at that feel, and that's why he was talking about everything, his London store, his New York store, his Beijing store, all these stores all around the world, Miami, have a totally different blueprint, totally different vibe. And I thought that was a really interesting take, because it's just more work. You know what I mean? It's more,
Yeah.
and to your point, it's the hardest thing in the world to just keep recreating lightning. But when you
Yeah.
find a team that can do it, I think, I mean, for me, like the OG Apple days were like that. When you had Ive and Jobs, they were just incredible. And I think I have this theory around like founders slash like leadership teams, where I think of like the best as helicopters. And so, like, a helicopter should not be able to fly. But the way they do it is they have the main rotor that generates the lift,
Yeah.
but that would turn the helicopter around. So they have the rear rotor, which is way smaller, but it turns in the opposite direction to counteract this
Yeah.
spinning force. And I think those are like where Jobs was the main rotor, Ive was kind of the counter rotator. And when you have these teams, you can just go so high but still be
Yeah.
able to fly. And when you don't, or you have somebody that's the crazy lift, but you don't have a rear rotor, you get into some really crazy places, because the helicopter just spins out of control.
Yeah.
And I think that has been something that I've been kind of batting around in my head, where it's like, oh man, these co-founding pairs, or finding that really match, is really important. And you don't want to be the same person. You really actually want to be quite different
Yeah.
people, like a Venn diagram. There's a middle part that we agree on, but these other things, because you build in the different perspectives, which is really, really important. Those are good
Yeah.
picks. Those are good picks. Aesop
I
and
think
ALD, those are good picks.
there's there's a there's something about that a lot of brands could learn from hospitality, like hospitality retail, like you said with those high end stores, they all start to feel the same. I think two brands that really like built a different hospitality experience, and I mean, I always see your posts on hotels, but like Isidore Sharp, who started
Yep.
Four Seasons, I don't know if you ever read his book, but fuck, it's great.
Oh, I haven't.
And
I'm gonna make a note.
it's so good, man. He's Canadian, by the way. Shout out to Canada.
Let's
And
go.
and I mean, when you read that book, you're like, man, everything we take for granted in hotels, that guy fucking invented. But what him and Alex Calderwood started Ace Hotel, and Ace Hotel and Four Seasons are the two brands that I always gravitate towards, because um, they position their places and their spaces way more like, okay, you're in New York or you're in whatever, Belize or wherever. And we want you to spend as much time enjoying our spaces versus a bed to lay on and go enjoy the city.
It's
And
exactly right.
that sounds weird because that's not why you're traveling, but they made spaces so inviting and so um, you never wanted to leave, right? Not the city, but the hotel itself. And by focusing on like vibrant community spaces and just details in the rooms that people had never seen, even if they were simple. Like Ace Hotel was the ones who started putting record players in the rooms. And yeah, it's gimmicky and stupid, but people were posting on Instagram about it because it was unique and it wasn't a fucking AM radio.
Yes.
Is it expensive? No, it's unique. And it's another element of the brand to inject your brand, right? Like the records that are there aren't Taylor Swift. They're curated by someone who's a fucking surgeon at making playlists or, curating music, or a DJ. And all those little details just add up to just this amazing experience. And both those brands do that extremely well. Ace Hotel, a little less now since Alex Calderwood died, but I think both those are really good as well.
I couldn't agree with you more. And for new listeners, one of my toxic traits is when I travel, I stay fairly bougie. And last year, 2 years ago, I went on a whole just 30-day vision quest all across Europe, stayed at just the nicest hotels. And dude, the Four Seasons were the best days. They were hands down the best days. Like I did the Four Seasons in Budapest. It was an old castle that they renovated right in just the coolest area, looking across the big famous bridge. I mean, and to your point, like surprise and delight is a fucking hell of a drug, man. And they don't
Yeah.
tell you about these things. And then you find them and you're like, wow, man, somebody really thought through every detail. Like maybe this thing wouldn't ever be discovered, but when you do discover it, oh my gosh, it is an
Yeah.
emotional connection that every brand builder is seeking out. And when it's organic and the person finds it, that surprise and delight is really like the worst thing you can do is tell somebody about it. Like you
Yeah.
want them to discover it, and when they discover it, man, you have a fan for life. And I agree with you because I not that I thought Four Seasons were like chuggy or kind of like dated or like old money, but it was the best experience, and they think through everything. The service was fantastic, the like just everything. I just recently went to see my dad in Charlotte, and I stayed at this hotel called the Ivies. Re- Really nice hotel. I think it's 4 star, not 5 star, but really brilliant. But I've never seen they had like 6,000 5 star reviews on every single review platform, which just doesn't like there's Karens out there that are just like,
Yeah.
oh,
Of
this thing.
course.
And it was that exquisite. The service, the room, the everything was just so perfect. And I think that is just really hard to do candidly. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of economic headwinds, right? Where it's like, hey, I want to cut the corner here and cut the corner there. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. But to build a real legacy brand that people will really connect with time in and time again, you have to think about the customer before the P&L. And that's a hard sell, especially for like to your point when the founder leadership changes or whatever. Because personally, I've been in Austin now for a really long time, so I'm kind of like anti Starbucks. But I used to be a Gold Card member. I used to do, and I think that brand is just absolutely in the gutter now. I mean, you go now, the people hate it there. It's just a shitty experience. People buying online, just
Oh,
coming to
it's
pick it up.
dirty and
Used,
messy.
yeah, it used to be the like it used to be on par for me for boutique coffee shops where it's like, yeah, I'll just go to Starbucks. You used to meet people there, all
Yeah.
these things, and now it's I think really driven by the profit motive, which again, nothing wrong with that. But I thought that was a brand that was really, really high end and really awesome. And it has really
Yeah.
suffered in its kind of evolution to make more money. And I think that, I mean, obviously the CEO got changed. So that's definitely, they're going to try and do that. But I think that's one that is really, really fallen off for me. And it used to be really on a pedestal for me.
Yeah. And, Four Seasons and hotels like that it's that same mentality, right? Like if they took the one of three blueprints that Hilton uses for every hotel and did those, could they make more money and spend less money? Probably. But there's a leadership at the top that just won't fucking waver
Yes.
for a bottom line. And obviously they make a shitload of money because their room rates are insane. And I'm
Yes.
sure they're doing fine. But if they did waver a little bit on design and they didn't adapt to every location and make it different and unique, they'd probably have a lot higher profit margin. But and that's why that money is it's that big divider where it's like when you start chasing that, that's when all creative and design goes out the window.
It's
It's
exactly
gone.
right. And ironically, you start to make less money
Yeah.
because you lose the je ne sais quoi. You
Yeah.
lose the thing that made you the thing. Because weirdly enough, I'm a big Costco brand guy. I have actually never even been to a Costco, but like the stories I read and like the just absolute pushback of making sure the hot dog and soda are the same price forever. Like I will kill you if you move this pricing. It's like
Yeah.
that's brand to me. That is like understanding your
Yeah.
customer, understanding your job to be done, and understanding what you want people to perceive you as. And I think that is uh, we've been talking about kind of highfalutin brands. Well, I guess Starbucks. I mean, even Starbucks was still like it's you're not walking out of there for nothing. But I
Yeah.
think that has been just a really cool exercise in understanding your customer and making sure that you are not gonna take the easy way out to make more money. You
Yeah.
want to make sure that people like you can make your money in other ways, kind of thing. And I think that's
Yeah.
a really cool one. Um, how do you stay inspired? where do you find inspiration? Is it music? Is it art? Is it you just walking in a park? Like, because one of the things I've found with creativity is if you don't um, refill your inspiration batteries, it's hard to be creative.
Yeah. Yeah, honestly, it's actually admittedly very hard where I live because it's not a super inspiring city. If I showed you outside right now, it's quite ugly. But I've grown a nice network of people that are kind of the inspiring people
Yeah,
around the city. So when it's locally, it's going to restaurants. That's
yeah,
people that invest in their team and their food and the space and the experience. To me, that's kind of like traveling and going to a hotel and getting that
yes,
wow experience. And so do a lot of that. Even though I don't really drink much anymore, I still like to go and eat and experience. And then travel, like even with 3 kids, we travel a lot. We lived in Miami for a long time. We lived in Paris. We
yeah.
lived in New York. And so
Paris is stunning.
just, yeah, it's just walking around places like that. To be honest, I haven't looked at a website design inspiration. Like I don't look for any inspiration online. I haven't looked for inspiration online in years. It's all physical, all physical.
Yeah, ironically too, I'm the same where my biggest epiphanies or inspirations come from adjacent or completely orthogonal spaces
Yeah,
where it's like to your point, hospitality or physical or like I'm like, "Oh my gosh, that is a brilliant way that I can bring into SaaS." Or that is a
yeah,
really cool thing that I can bring into SaaS. I'm not going and looking at other SaaS people like, "Oh, Howard,
yeah,
what's this big SaaS company doing that I should be doing?" Like again, there's a time and place for that, but that's not my inspiration. That is that's your workout plan. That's your meat and vegetables. But when you want to figure out that really cool mousse or some sort of really mind blowing dessert, then you go to that. And yeah, man, I completely agree with you. I've found Barcelona, Madrid, Paris, and London. I call them the Tom Brady of cities, where you can like them or hate them, but they're undeniable. They are. I
yeah,
mean, Paris is exquisite, man. Paris is a really it is a stunning, just absolutely stunning
yeah.
city. Vienna, Budapest. Have you been to Prague?
No,
Prague's fantastic. I've been twice now. Prague is one of the. It's like a Harry Potter movie, man. It is.
yeah,
It's really awesome, and I think for me, the States is the best place to make money, but Europe does life a lot better, where
yeah,
they just get it. But there's just especially Barcelona, man. You just walk around and you just have the people, the food, the architecture, the vibe. It's just we really don't have that in the States. I mean, really honestly, I think the only walkable city in the States is probably New York. And that I love New York. It's crazy, it's awesome, but it's chaos. Your head's on a
yeah,
swivel, honking, all this stuff. In Barcelona, you can walk for 2 hours and you're just like, ah, it's actually
yeah.
funny. I got the Barcelona on. I didn't think of that.
And
But
it's a lot of like a lot of people they get in that mindset of like I'm a web designer or I'm a brand
yes,
designer or I'm a clothing designer, and that's where they're looking for inspiration. And there's merit in having that kind of like direct inspiration or first degree inspiration, but
yes,
I'm way more interested in just like I don't get inspired on a logo I'm working on and eating food. What I'm inspired by is, oh, someone's putting this much passion into something, and I get
yes,
excited about that, and I'm like, I should be. Why the fuck am I not putting that much passion into this?
nailed it.
And it's the same. Like, I'll go for coffee with friends of mine who are in other fields, and I have this one friend who's just this phenomenal architect, and whenever we're having coffee, he's just nonstop on napkins sketching while we're talking, and just that, like, just seeing how talented he is at drawing
Yes.
a house sketch, um, that inspired. I'm just like, oh wow, like someone can't even put down their pencil long enough to just have a fucking conversation. That's
Yes.
inspiring to me because it's like they care that much or they're excited that much about their work. Why the fuck am I not excited? What am I doing wrong? Now I'm looking for something next, you know? And so I'm way more interested in those kind of second degree
I think it's perfect.
inspirations.
That's a beautiful way to put it, because it's almost like for me, you're sharpening the sword versus going to learn another weapon or going to
Yeah.
learn another thing, and you just get these mind expansions of. There's a great Buddhist ideal called beginner's mind, and when you get to a place like
Yeah.
you're at, where you have so much expertise in something, it's really challenging to go back to like almost what we were talking about at the beginning of like people that don't have that, like, oh my god, that's so simple. of course I should do that. But for you, it was just like this curation of so long that you have to remember, okay, cool, yeah, everybody's not where I'm at on my journey, because everybody's on their own journey, and there's nothing wrong with that. But being able to flip those modes into beginner's mind and then becoming the expert, I think, is when you have true mastery of the skill or the kind of vertical that you're an expert in.
Yeah, and I think like it takes a long time, but like I remember when starting out in any design field, or any marketing anything, you're always creating something, and then you're spending another half of the time trying to figure out how am I explaining it and
Yes.
pitching it and getting
Yes.
someone to buy into it. And now I just do whatever the fuck I want. And
Yes.
then if they really want an explanation, then I make one up by post rationalizing it
Yes.
in post. And they're like, okay, well, how'd you come up with this? And a lot of times I can't really explain it. I'm just like, I don't know. I can't explain how I'm not going to tell them I got the idea from a bar in
Yes.
Europe and that's where I saw it and then this and this. I'm like, no, I'll just post rationalize and make something up to make you feel good. But for the most part, it's just all experience. It's not me planning things like you would in necessarily um, a more junior state where you're kind of just like you are looking online for logo inspiration when you're
Yes.
designing a logo and then you end up
Yes.
with a fucking logo that looks like someone else's logo.
Yes. It's so well said, man. I think the the most powerful people in the world are storytellers, and the irony of a lot of art is that what you just said, without the post rationalization or without the story, the art doesn't impact you as much. And so
Yeah.
you definitely, yeah, you definitely need to have the story, but it doesn't always need to be the real story. Just say. I mean,
Yeah.
like at Triple Whale, when they told me the founding story, I was like, yeah, I get it, but no, that's terrible. We're just
Yeah.
gonna
That's
make
just,
some.
let's
We're
just
gonna
not
make
talk
up a
about it.
cool one. Yeah,
Yeah.
we're gonna make up a cool one that we're just gonna permeate into the zeitgeist, and that's gonna
Yeah.
be our founding story now. And so, but yeah, man, stories matter, and I think in specific, stories matter when you have they call it the artist's curse, right? When like something for you is so easy that you feel guilty versus all these other people have no idea, and you're like, man, I can make money off of this. It's crazy. And once you remove that guilt, you can really start
Yeah.
to move mountains, because that was the kind of going back to your buddy sketching on the napkin. Like when you find your path, man, that is one of the most exciting things. And sometimes your path ends and you need to find a new mountain
Yeah.
to climb, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think the saddest thing is to see the person that used to be great stay in too long, like Jordan wearing
Yeah.
45, or you know what I mean, where you're just like, hey dude, it's fine, you did an amazing job, and like go do
Yeah.
a new thing now, versus like you just stay too long. And it's that's yeah, but it's hard though, it's hard.
Yeah.
But dude, you're my favorite human. I fucking love this. Okay, last question. What is your equation of excellence? What do you think excellence is a function of?
Oh man. Like
Try to,
equation in a sense of like actual like on my outline
yeah,
and parameters.
yeah. Like what inputs do you think you need to be excellent?
I mean, the two biggest ones for me, which kind of sound like oxymorons, but consistency
Yeah,
and exploration. For me,
yeah,
where every time audit had that, like we're talking about that down tick where you're just like, it's just not, something's not functioning. It's because we stopped exploring, we stopped being interested in, okay, what can we change? What can we tweak? Very, very rarely are we just sitting static. We're always kind of exploring what can change. Um, and it's the same in CRO. A lot of the times the customer will come to us and be like, well, our conversion's like 6. Do we really need to go, like, should we be changing anything? And I'm kind of like, well, no, if you're happy with that, but it sounds like you're a capitalist and you got 94% left before you're at 100. So let's fucking go. Um, and so like that like want to just constantly explore, whether that's going to a restaurant for exploration or inspiration or exploring other products we could launch, or
yeah,
just always having that mindset and never being comfortable with just
yes,
the status quo. I think that's what, at least from a creative standpoint, the second that you get comfortable with status quo, you're done.
done.
You have to constantly be exploring because, I mean, look at how fast shit's changing with AI and everything. And then also just what happens when you get too comfortable is you get stuff like that's how it's a mix of both with Jaguar, right? Like they the new uh, the new kind of batch of people that are now running it, they weren't happy with that status quo, and then they started exploring a little too much. So that's probably the wrong example, but like it's for me, those two things, being consistent, I think it's probably one of the primary and only things I teach my kids. Like I'm a pretty strict dad, and but I'm also pretty. They kind of do what they want within reason, but that's the main thing I talk to them about is consistency. It's like if you, no matter what you're doing, right? Like you sign up for soccer and you aren't happy after you lose the first game, you don't want to play soccer. Guess what? Too bad. You signed up. You're going to be a team player. You're going to be consistent, and you're going to play it out. And by the end, they're happy. Never letting them quit and stuff like that is one of the big things for me. So I think consistency and exploration, man, those are the things that when I look at everything that I've done over the last 20 years, it's primarily exploration. Like I ended up designing and starting a motorcycle company through exploration and by stopping at a gas station and stuff like that. If you're not open to it and you're in that mindset of just like okay with the status quo, you're never going to get those opportunities. And I'll be the first to, like I said at the start, I'm not by trade and by even my nature and DNA, I'm not an artist. Like you asked me to draw a happy face right now, it'll look like shit. It's a lot of me just constantly exploring and adapting and learning and doing design my way in a different way. I can't draw that house on a napkin ever. And so for me, those two go hand in hand because, being consistent in that exploration is probably the biggest thing.
Yeah, man, I love that. And the way I see it is like becoming a connoisseur and an explorer. Like you wanna have taste and opinions on things, but at the same time you want to keep expanding those opinions and just go explore. And you got to be okay with. I got in a really weird phase of my life of like I think optimization can take you in down paths that just aren't happy. Where it's
Mm-hmm.
like, dude, it's okay that you go try a meal and you're like, hey, I know that I don't like Thai food now. And I went and tried Thai food. That's awesome. And I explored
Yeah.
it and it's just not for me. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yep.
And I think there's a great guy named Kevin Kelly, Whole Earth Catalog, just a G. And he talks about how he tries to split his life into 70% business as usual, the things I like, and then 30% are just wacky, weird. Let me go just try something new. Because what if I
Yeah.
do find something awesome and maybe I never knew, but if you don't try it, there's no way to really explore things. Like, so I love that, dude. I think exploration and consistency is a fantastic answer. Um, okay, how can people get more involved with Mr. Shaun? How can they sign up for Audit? This time's yours, my friend.
You can go to audit.co and just kind of poke around, explore our products. We recently took on a new development department, so we actually build the changes if you want now. We do brand work, UX work. We have a whole service department now outside of our reports, so it's grown quite a bit. So go explore if you have before and if you haven't before. If you want to connect with me, you can book literally my calendar right on the site. Twitter is my last name, IFY Brandt, Brantify, BRANDTIFY.
Oh my
I don't
gosh, I
really
just
post.
put two and two together. Jesus. Wow. Wow. We're breaking news here, people.
Yeah.
Jesus, I'm dumb.
So yeah, I don't really post much on there because I'm not a big social media fan, but you can follow me on there. And yeah, I mean, book a call. Let's chat. We're not really pushy salesmen. We'll just hop on and talk about your site. If you want to use us, you can.
I love it, man. Yeah, one of just the most beautiful humans, dude. Thank you for taking the time. Go get you an audit, audit.co. Fantastic, fantastic work. Like I said, I've used them twice in the past, and they just blew my socks off. What else we got for you? We have a wonderful newsletter that goes out every week, curated by the indomitable Alexa Kilroy, called The Geometry of Growth. You can go to firmoutcommerce.com, sign up for that. And then if you want to go make the money printer go burr on your Shopify site, you can sign up for a demo, firmoutcommerce.com. And that's all we got for you, folks. We'll see you on the flip. Shaun, dude, thank you so much, brother. You're such an inspiration and muse for me. And I'm glad the kiddos are getting good on the skis, following in Dad's footsteps. I like that. You
Yeah,
got
man,
the
I'm
young
stoked
gun
about
down
it.
the mountain. That's
Yeah,
pretty impressive. I've never been
yeah,
skiing.
man.
Maybe I need to make it up and go shred with you. I need
That's
to put that
that's a
in
good
my
excuse for
repertoire.
you to come to Canada.
Exactly. All right, folks. Thanks so
Okay,
much for listening. We will see you next time. Bye bye.
thanks, Rabah.